deceptive, manipulative.
He's also a former social worker and a political campaign activist.
Some people in town say the base is run by aliens working with our federal government to conduct mind control and genetic experiments.
I'm leaving. I'm glad. Thanks a lot, society, for railroading my ass.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Eerie Americas. This is your host, Kristi Hull.
This is Vicky Ayala.
This is me and Vic's favorite month, favorite time of the year. We are basic as fuck. We don't care. We love it. We are big October fans. This is Eerie October month, and we're going to take full advantage. So welcome. I hope you guys enjoy. We're going to have some really, really dope-ass episodes for you this month.
Yep, we've been keeping the creepy for this month. We've actually been talking about it probably since August, to the point where I think I mentioned it in a previous episode. We had already decided our October episodes before even finishing September. We are so excited. We hope you guys, well, if you're listening to this podcast, you should like eerie stuff, but it's going to get a lot creepier.
And speaking of creepy, I'm sorry if you guys got freaked out. The last recording, so it was really funny. I was editing a few weeks ago, and I'm like, what is that noise? I'm like, it sounds like a vibration, or it sounds like, it's like, it was so faint, and it would happen so seldomly that I couldn't pinpoint what it was. And I was like, it must be Vicky's phone. Maybe she forgot to silence it. It must be on vibrate. Like, there's no other thing I can think. So we're sitting here, and before we start the episode, of course, we chit chat for a little bit. And I'm like, yeah, just FYI, there was some kind of vibration or some kind of noise. She listened to it. It turns out it's her dog snoring. So if you guys caught it, it was Lena sleeping in the background, literally passed out, snoring. And she's a pit bull. She's loud. And when she's sleeping, she is out of it. So it was so freaking fun.
It was hilarious because I remember that Kristi was like, dude, we got to silence our phones. Like, the mics pick up everything. And I was like, my phone's always on silent. So we could not figure it out. And I'm telling you this, for days we didn't know. And the reason I figured it out is because I was sitting on my couch with Lena right next to me like normal. And all of a sudden I hear the sound and I'm like, oh, that was you snoring. And I told Kristi, and we're probably still laughing about it a week later. So you guys will all have the pleasure of listening to my 70-pound pit bull snoring. That's how close she sits to me when I'm recording.
She's just a character. Like we said, we knew this from the get-go. The hardest part will be our pets, because I have a cat. I plan to get a second cat and eventually a dog too. Lena is her big baby man girl, so she always needs her constant attention. It's going to be definitely an adjustment, but yeah, if you guys...
Yeah, we say this as Kristi is watching me struggle with Lena climbing on top of me on the webcam. Literally, I cannot see Kristi. I'm literally pushing my dog down so I can see over her, so I can look at Kristi.
And all I see is Lena's big body just taking up the entire webcam. So yeah, this is an adjustment. I hope you guys are cool with it. If not, too freaking bad. It's basically, we're not...
It's either the adjustment or no show, so...
Let me get into Reddit here. I found one that was pretty creepy, and it's short and sweet, so it'll go really well with this.
Whenever you say that, it's always really bad and creeps me out.
This is off the paranormal posts, and this is from Tanuki Teeth. Yeah, Tanuki Teeth. Let's go with that. It is the Devil's Tree. That's what the headline reads. There's this place in your favorite place, Port St. Lucia, Florida. That's called, your favorite state. That's called the Devil's Tree. You can Google it, but essentially it's local lore that girls/nuns, there's different versions after it telephoned its way around, were raped and hung at this tree in a small forest. As well
that got dark so quickly.
Real quick. As well as satanic rituals being performed at the base of this tree and in the woods as well. They tried to cut down the tree once word got out, but something always happened. They were rained out, tools stopped working, trees broke down the tools. Insane coincidences every time they try to take it down. I visited the tree twice, during the day of course, once with a group of friends and the other just myself and my other good friend. It's not labeled or anything, not a tourist attraction, but you know exactly which tree it is when you see it. And it's so creepy because like our logo is a tree and ours is a creepy tree, and I know a creepy tree when I see it. Like I don't even have to Google it to know what she's talking about.
Like just that description, I'm like, I guarantee you if we went down there, we would know exactly what tree it is.
Mm-hmm. You can see the attempts to cut and burn down the tree. All the while, it looks bigger and healthier than the other trees around it. The first time I visited with my friends, everything was normal up until we got to the actual tree. The stench of death hit us all at once. It made us all want to hurl. And apparently we weren't the only ones that smelled it either. An entire nest of vultures were circling the area, about 30 to 50 of them in total. We searched the whole woods for the source of the smell, wanting to make sure there wasn't another murder or anything, and couldn't find it for the life of us. The second time I went, it was just me and my other close friend, and it was a much calmer, more observant trip. We were hanging out under the tree, reading, when we both realized something. We were in complete silence. I mean, complete silence.
In the woods?
Which is incredibly unnerving, exactly, for a small forest next to a public park, middle of the day. There were no sounds of bugs or squirrels or even wind. I took a video of it, unsure if I can find it again, but I'll definitely look and update this if I do. Just overall very ominous. Definitely a dark energy in the forest.
That's creepy. Thank God that was short. I don't think I could handle like a lot of that story.
That's definitely not a tree that I'm visiting myself. So
I don't even want to visit Florida, much less the devil tree.
Yeah, I'm forced to go down there strictly to visit my parental unit. But other than that, I will not go there and just be like, oh yeah, I'm going to go check out this haunted tree. I can freak myself out in a closer place that isn't the basement of America, aka Florida.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you guys that I wasn't going to continue to creep you out, but that's probably that's not the case right now.
This is Eerie October, okay? Accept it.
All like I creep myself out writing this. It's a case that from the time I even thought of starting this podcast, I wanted to cover it, but we had decided to cover obscure cases, and I kind of put it on the back burner because it's something that was in the news that I thought was popular. And then I just decided to search it and nobody's really covered it. So I'm super surprised. So I want to do it before other people do.
Cool.
And it is a crazy case. Originally, I was looking for, something creepy like demonic possession, but this case has demonic possession. It's got a police investigation. It's got a Department of Children's Services investigation. It's got several psycho.
So
yes.
Everybody and their mother is involved in this case.
Everybody. It took place in Gary, Indiana, and they even have a 37-year veteran of the police department who said that he initially thought that this family was just kind of basically bullshitting and making up this story because they wanted money. And after he visited the home, he just said, I'm a believer. It is a case of the Ammons family. Their house is known as the 200 Demons House or just Demon House. It's a haunting and demonic possession, and it actually was pretty recent. It happened in 2011 and 2012. There's even an 800-page report from the Department of Children's Services on this case, so you know that shit is crazy.
Wait a minute, 800 pages?
I know it does. There's 3 kids involved, but that's how crazy it is. And this only took place over a couple of months in 2011 and 2012, and there's an 800-page report on it.
Wow, insane. Wow.
That's why I actually took a couple of days to shorten this. And I actually had so many articles on it, but I focused on it. I found on Wikipedia and this one article from the Indiana Star. They just call it the Star because it gave me so much information that if I put all those articles together, you guys would be listening to a 3-hour-long episode. The story kind of starts with LaToya Ammons, her mother, Rosa Campbell, and LaToya's 3 children. Their names haven't been released. I looked in a million different articles, and one of them actually said they're underage, and she said that her agreement for talking about what's going on were that her children's names never be released. But what we do know is that there's a 12-year-old daughter, an 8-year-old son, and a 9-year-old son, and a 7-year-old son. And the story begins in November 2011 when they all moved into this rental house. The address was 3860 Carolina Street in Gary, Indiana. And it was a really quiet street, had a bunch of little small 1-story homes. And the activity didn't take long at all to start. They moved in November and they already had shit happening in December. They said that despite the fact that it was winter in Indiana, there was a bunch of black flies that were in their porch that's enclosed.
You know my hate of flies, mosquitoes, all that stuff, because it's not that they creep me out. It's just they're never a good omen. Ever. Even when I have one in my kitchen or trying to get into my screen, I loathe them. If I saw swarms of flies, I'd be like, oh, breaking this lease. Bye.
And I know that's true because there was a couple of episodes where while we were recording, Kristi literally stopped because she saw one fly and would not stop until she fucking killed it.
I hate them.
Followed that shit all around her apartment until she fucking killed it.
I don't kill animals. I barely eat meat. I'm a believer that everything has a life except flies. Flies and cockroaches are the most useless things on this planet. One of my cousin's friends is studying bugs and stuff like that. And she's a huge like bug scientist nerd. And she's like, no, they do this and that. I'm like, no, they are a leech to humanity. But yeah, flies no good.
So flies no good. And according to the mother Rosa, she literally said, this isn't normal. We killed them and killed them and killed them, and they kept coming back. Like, they would get rid of every single fly, and Kristi's nodding her head, and I know for sure she would have moved out that house already. And then there was other strange happenings too. Rosa and LaToya both said that they kept hearing these footsteps coming from the basement stairs, and they would hear a creaking door between the basement and the kitchen because the kitchen apparently had the staircase leading to the basement. So they just kept hearing all sorts of weird noises coming from there, and they would always check, and there would never be anybody there. They locked the door, and then even after they locked the door, they still heard the noises. Rosa, who again is LaToya's mom, stated that one night she woke up, saw a shadowy figure of a man pacing her living room, jumped up out of bed to investigate, which is something I wouldn't have done. I would have fucking you know how like in movies they cover their head with the blanket and the pillow? I would have done that. But she wanted to investigate. She didn't find anyone, but she did find these large, wet boot prints.
What?
Yes.
In the middle of the night?
In the middle of the night in her living room.
No way.
And then she also claimed that she was choked one night by an unknown force. So there's so much proof of this case. Like, I didn't even write this down, but I remember that the Indianapolis Star actually printed a picture of a shadowy figure in the window when nobody was home. I'm going to try to find it and I'm going to post it. Because I remember that's what made me want to cover this, because they literally said nobody was home and there's a picture of a shadowy figure. That's just the start of it. Things took a turn for the worse, and this is only March. So this is only a few months later, March of 2012. And the occurrences kind of go from like slightly disturbing to completely fucking terrifying. On March 10, 2012, the family had some friends and family over because they were unfortunately mourning the death of a loved one. So they had a bunch of people staying over the house. And normally they would have been asleep in the middle of the night, but because they had friends and family over, 2 a.m. everybody was still awake. Then there was a scream. Someone screamed, "Mama, Mama." So Rosa, the grandmother, she runs into her bedroom where LaToya's daughter and another friend were staying in that bedroom. And she gets in there and the 12-year-old is levitating above the bed unconscious. And by then, of course, friends and family are flocking to the room trying to see what happened, and they all witness it.
So this isn't like one or two people.
No, this is a whole house of people. Mm-hmm. So according to the article, the Indianapolis Star, there's a lot of witness accounts of the events, and several friends and family witnessed it. And so they all kind of surrounded the girl, and they just kept praying and praying until eventually she was lowered back onto the bed. And then the next morning she woke up and did not remember a damn thing, which is better. Which is good, because if you remember that, that's freaky already. Not surprisingly, all of the friends and family who stayed over and witnessed this refused to come back to the house.
Yeah, you think? I would have never I wouldn't even go on that block anymore, let alone here. I'd be like, sorry, you have to come to me and you have to sage yourself before you walk into my home. Literally, I would not play that game. No way.
To be honest, I know this sounds terrible, but I probably wouldn't have even stayed and prayed for her. I probably would have left right as the minute I saw somebody levitating. I'd be like, sorry, peace out.
Oh, yeah, I'm that bitch. Oh, I'm the bitch. If we're ever in a movie, like a scary movie scenario, you won't find me. I'll be gone. Like, you guys will be sitting there talking about what to do, and I'll already have left it. I won't even input. I'll be out. Like, I don't play those games.
Exactly. At this point, Rosa tells her daughter LaToya that, they need help. They need to talk to somebody because they need to figure out how to deal with this. Although they had no idea what the hell any of this was, they just kind of course, think it's supernatural. So they started out by calling like local churches, trying to get someone to listen to their story, seeing if maybe somebody would come out and come to the home and maybe bless it or tell them what's going on. And nobody really listened to them because, again, this is 2011. Nobody's listening to this shit. They think that people, at this point, all these movies have come out and they just think that people are sensationalizing it. And then finally, they get someone to listen. And they come and visit the home and they tell them, okay, you have spirits in your house. So they give a bunch of recommendations that LaToya and her mom, that they follow. The first thing that they said is to clean the home with bleach and ammonia, which will literally kill Kristi because she's allergic to everything. Mm-hmm. And then use oil to draw crosses on every door and window. So she does that. She pours olive oil on her kids' hands and their feet, and she puts an oil in the shape of a cross on their forehead. I don't know if it's because like demons don't like calories because oil is fucking fattening. Then in addition to reaching out to the church, according to the article from the Star, they reached out to 2 clairvoyants. In case you don't know what a clairvoyant is, it's a person who claims to have a supernatural ability to perceive events in the future or beyond normal sensory contact. The clairvoyant stated that they believe that there were 200 demons in the home. I didn't even know there were 200 demons.
Mansion?
No!
Mansion of demons?
I swear to God, it wasn't even a mansion, so I don't know how 200 demons fit in this house. Maybe that's why they're so angry, because they don't have any space.
Yeah.
So they actually told LaToya and Rosa, which I'm sure other people probably thought is your best bet is to move. But as we also know, if you're not rich, you're not moving. So moving was not an option. Instead of moving, they just took some of the other suggestions given by the clairvoyants and the church. So the first thing LaToya does is she makes an altar in the basement, which is where a lot of the activity was stemming from. She covered an end table with a white sheet. She placed a white candle, a statue of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph on it. She opened up the Bible to Psalm 91, which I looked up. It basically states like, he who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. Surely he will save you from the fowler's snare and from the deadly pestilence. So they thought this is the prayer that they wanted. She also poured these rings of salt against the walls to, quote unquote, dissuade the demons. She also wore a white t-shirt and a white scarf around her head. She burned sage and sulfur, which I always knew about sage, but not about sulfur, which sulfur is supposed to get rid of bad energy. Basically, they said to start upstairs and then work their way towards the basement, which is what they did. They also drew a cross with the smoke. And then while she was doing all this, she read another part of Psalm 91 as she moved through the house, which says, you will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, nor the plague that destroys at midday. And after she does this, nothing happens in the house anymore, like nothing odd for a few days.
It just kind of freaked them out enough to shut them up for a few days.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because things got worse after that. So it probably just calmed them down enough to plan something bigger.
Right.
So after this happens, Rosa states that all of the children and LaToya were then possessed by demons. The kids' eyes would bulge out. They would have these evil smiles across their faces, and their voices would suddenly deepen every time that this would happen. Rosa, who in the past, in the beginning of this story, I told you that she had been choked and she had seen a shadowy figure. She stated the only reason the demons didn't enter her was because she thinks she was born with the protection from evil and that she had a guardian to protect her, but apparently not enough from her getting choked, just enough from her getting possessed.
I think why people get so scared with demons and kids is because kids kind of have that innocence about them where they can't understand.
Pure.
Exactly. And they're so pure, they don't understand what's reality and what's not normal and what is this animal or thing or being presented itself in a manner where it wasn't initially horrifying. Then it's easy for them to kind of access the children. Interesting that they did, like the girl woke up the next day and didn't remember.
They didn't remember anything because they're open to it, and then you can kind of control them more. And every movie you've ever seen with demonic possession, whenever it's a younger person, it's a lot easier for the demon to control them. Whereas with adults, I think they fight a little bit more, because LaToya does remember some of the stuff from when she was possessed, because she says that she would feel weak, she would feel lightheaded, and she would feel really warm, and her whole body would shake, and she would feel out of control. And she remembers some of the things she felt, whereas the kids don't remember. And then the youngest son, the 7-year-old, he started sitting in a closet and talking to someone they couldn't see. And apparently the little boy he was talking to was describing what it was like to get killed.
Whoa.
So Rosa said that one day the little boy literally flew out of the bathroom as if somebody had thrown him. And then another time, a headboard smacked the daughter, causing her to need stitches. And the daughter said that sometimes she would feel like she was being choked or she was being held down and that she couldn't move and she couldn't speak. And she said she would hear a voice that would tell her that she's never going to see her family again and that she wouldn't live another 20 minutes. So some nights it was so bad that the family had to stay at a hotel.
I would ask my landlord for reimbursement. Be like, sorry, if I can't sleep over here, why am I paying for this evening?
And the crazy thing is that I did look up about the landlord, and he does make a statement later on. But basically the landlord claims that nothing happened before them and nothing happened after them. But I don't know if I believe that. But after all this, they decided like they can't take it anymore. So they actually turned, I don't know why, but they turned to their family physician. I'm not really sure what a family physician would have done, but Dr. Jeffrey Onyekwu, I'm so sorry, I probably butchered that, on April 19th, 2012. Mind you, they've only lived there since November. So it's only been 5 months. They described what they were going through. They hoped he would understand. And he immediately was like, that's bizarre. And this is directly quoted, 20 years and I've never heard anything like that in my life. I was scared myself when I walked into the room. And then he wouldn't speak any more about it. They asked him for like more comments and they're like, nope, I'm not speaking more about it unless LaToya signs a psychiatric clearance for the waiver of confidentiality. Like he wouldn't speak, but in his medical notes, he wrote delusions of ghost in home. He wrote hallucinations, and then he wrote history of ghosts at home and delusional, according, to him. Now, the details of what happened next are actually well documented. So like a lot of these stories, they just claims that people just say what happened, but this is actual documentation of what is going on at this point. It's documented in that DCS report that I talked about, in the 800-page report from the Department of Child Services. It's documented by case managers and medical staff.
Did the physician call DCS? Is that the assumption?
A couple of people called DCS.
I guess I would too.
I'll explain it later, but someone from his office ends up calling DCS. So according to this report, the youngest boy, the 7-year-old, was the one that he actually cursed the doctor in like a demonic, deep voice. The medical staff reported that the young boy was, quote, lifted and thrown in the wall without nobody touching him.
Whoa.
At this point, him and his brother, the 9-year-old, both passed out and wouldn't wake up. So this is when 911 was called and they ended up in the hospital. So the boys are taken to the hospital. And LaToya's freaking out because she knows what's been going on. And she actually asked them if she could bless them with olive oil. And the whole staff laughed at her because they don't know anything that's going on yet. And if they had known, they probably would have let her do it. So the boys eventually wake up. The older son is okay, but the young 7-year-old is like growling, screaming, thrashing. And it took 5 grown men to hold him down. He is 7.
No 7-year-old is not strong ever.
Exactly. And you've seen those movies where people throw people all over the place. So this is a point where someone actually called DCS and asked the agency to investigate LaToya because they thought that she was abusing her children. Because, of course, they don't know the past. They just see that, like, her daughter needed stitches and her son's acting out.
To look at it from their frame of mind, from a medical standpoint, this stuff is not recognized.
Right.
So they have to make the assumption that she might be hurting the kids and who knows, the things that we as people that don't work for Department of Child Services probably have no idea what these other people have seen. So maybe they had it in their head that it wasn't something paranormal at all.
Paranormal is still like, not everybody believes in it. So they're not going to automatically jump to paranormal. They're going to be like, well, what's the logical explanation for it? Which even people who believe in the paranormal always look for a logical explanation.
What makes sense? What doesn't make sense?
Right. So this is the point where they get a case manager because they thought that maybe LaToya was suffering from a mental illness and that she was making her children say things. So they assign a case manager named Valerie Washington, and she is kind of asked to handle the investigation. And this is according to her report. So the hospital personnel examined LaToya, they examined her children, and they found them to be healthy and free of marks or bruises at the time. Then a psychiatrist evaluated LaToya. She was of sound mind. So then Valerie interviews the family. And while she's speaking to LaToya, the 7-year-old again starts growling with his teeth showing, which if you have an animal, I have Lena. If she's growling with her teeth showing, she's ready to attack. His eyes roll to the back of his head. He locks his hands around his older brother's throat and refused to let go. And it took a couple of adults to pry his hands open. So he tried to choke his brother out. Later that same evening, the same case manager, Valerie, now brings a registered nurse with her. His name is Willie Lee Walker. She brings the 2 boys into the room for an interview with Rosa, just without LaToya. So it's Valerie, the case manager, the registered nurse, Willie Lee Walker, the grandmother, and the 2 boys. So again, the 7-year-old turns and looks at his brother, stares at him into his eyes, begins to growl, and starts saying, "It's time to die," in a deep, unnatural voice, and then says, "I will kill you."
Oh, hell no. That is the creepiest 7-year-old I've ever heard of in my life.
Yep. While the youngest spoke in like this demon voice, the older brother then starts headbutting his grandmother in the stomach. So now they're both going apeshit.
My DR grandma would have beat the crap out of me whether I was possessed or not.
My Puerto Rican grandmother is 85 years old and would still beat the shit out of me. So Rosa grabs her grandson's hands and she starts praying. Now, if this isn't enough to already start proving shit, what happens next is even worse. Everybody's just shaken to their core with this. According to Valerie's original DCS report, and this is something that is backed up by the registered nurse that was with her, The 9-year-old had a weird grin on his face and walked backward up a wall to the ceiling, flips over, landing on his feet. And the craziest part is that he never let go of his grandmother's hand.
What?
His grandma was holding his hands praying, and he just walked up the wall, did a flip over her, and landed on his feet without ever letting go of his grandmother's hand.
That's not humanly possible. Something would have broken. What the fuck?
The report literally says he walked up the wall, flipped over her, and just stood there. He's like, there's no way he could have done that. So later, the police asked in front of the case manager, was he performing some sort of acrobatic trick? And she's like, no. This is her quote, glided backward on the floor, wall, and on the ceiling. And then she told police she was scared when it happened and she ran out of the room.
She's brave enough to continue being their caseworker. I would have been like, nope, you can't pay me enough to go back into that house. No way.
And then they asked the nurse, what did you do? And he was like, I ran out too. They both ran out the room.
And these are medical professionals. They've seen everything.
They've seen everything. And literally she said, that was crazy. I was like, everybody got to go. And everybody ran out the room. But this is on the official report that 2 medical professionals saw this happen. So they actually tell the doctor what happened. And of course, the doctor doesn't believe them. And he literally just tells the boy, okay, so if that happened, do it again. So the nurse is like, he can't do it again. The kid wasn't even himself when he did it. And the boy said he didn't remember doing it. So he obviously couldn't do something again that he didn't remember doing in the first place. The nurse actually said before this, like he had already believed in demons and spirits. And so he's like, this boy definitely had a demon in him. It could have been a result of mental illness, but a lot of times people with schizophrenia, people with mental illnesses are the ones most likely to get a demonic possession. But he said and then the case manager was like, there is an evil influence that is following this family. Like they're both convinced. Again, medical professionals, and this is on an official report. Some people say things but never put it on a report. They put this in the report. After this, LaToya spends the night at the hospital with the youngest son. Rosa takes the older son and the daughter to stay with a relative. The next day was the youngest son's 8th birthday. So DCS officials were like, okay, have the brother and the sister, have everybody come to the hospital, let them celebrate his birthday, and then we'll ask them a little bit more about what happened. And these motherfuckers, they tricked them. They had them bring the children in so they could remove the children from her custody.
That's so fucked up.
And they said it was all of the children were experiencing spiritual and emotional distress. So now it's April 20th, 2012, and Reverend Michael Magano received a call from a hospital chaplain. The chaplain asked him for a request that he hadn't been asked for in his entire decade as a priest. He asked him to perform an exorcism.
And it might sound strange as people that were podcasts that find these kinds of stories and stuff like that. Exorcisms are extremely rare. I know it sounds like, you see all these movies and you probably listen to a bunch of other true crime or horror that talks about exorcisms. It's one of the rarest things. It's like most people in the world will never be able to afford a Tesla. Most priests will never perform an exorcism. That's
right.
Kind of the extent of how I can explain how rare it is.
And it's because you need the church's permission, and the church doesn't really grant that shit, especially
unless there's a shit ton of evidence. Like it has 100% facts. This is what happened. And I think there's enough people to back this up at this point.
Oh, yeah. The Reverend actually agrees because, I'm guessing from his point of view, he's like, well, somebody's calling me about it. I should investigate it. And because most people don't jump to that conclusion, they usually think there's a logical explanation. So first, he wants to rule out any natural causes for what's going on. So 2 days later, comes to the house. He's in there about 2 hours. He stops mid-interview and points out this flickering light in the bathroom. But the light would stop flickering every time he walked over to it. If you watch movies enough, you know that they need their energy from somewhere. So he thinks this might be a sign of a demonic presence. And he just was kind of like, told the newspaper, it must be scared of me. He actually stops the interview again when he noticed that the blinds were swinging when there was no air current. Then
this guy's really observant.
Oh yeah, he's noticing everything.
That's really observant.
Then he also noted that what did he see in the living room? Wet footprints. Then all of a sudden, LaToya starts complaining of a headache. The priest, he puts a crucifix to her forehead and she starts convulsing. So after about 4 hours, he stated, all right, I'm convinced you're being haunted, you're being tormented by demons. And he also believed that there were ghosts in the house. And for those who don't know the difference, most of us do, but if you don't know the difference, ghosts are spirits of people who have passed away. And demons have never lived on this earth. They're just evil. They're usually theological or religious, but they're never have known to be alive or walk the earth. Before leaving, he blesses the house, sprinkles it with holy water, and tells LaToya, you need to leave. It isn't safe. So she moves in temporarily with the family member. But less than a week later, she's kind of forced to go back home because not only is this priest trying to perform an exorcism, but there is still an open DCS investigation. And the first thing that they're going to investigate was the house. So a week later, Valerie, still the case manager, by the way.
I know what those people get paid. I would have refused. I really would have. My cousin is a social worker. No freaking way.
I would not. She goes there. They're also accompanied by a police officer, plus another 2 police officers that are they're there out of sheer fucking curiosity.
They need it. If it took 5 people to take a 7-year-old down, what's it going to be when a grown man or a woman is possessed?
So LaToya, rightfully so in my opinion, refuses to go inside. But her mom Rosa states that she'll go. So she joins them. So now this house, you were wondering how big it is? It's 1 story. It's got 3 bedrooms, a living room, 1 bathroom, and this open style kitchen with a door that leads to the basement. So in the basement is that altar that she had made. So Rosa told them the demons seem to be coming from the basement. Now, one of the police officers is that 37-year veteran captain that I told you about, Charles Austin. He was part of the group, and he told the Star he believed in ghosts and the supernatural, but he didn't believe in demons. That is until he visited this house. During the walkthrough, one of the police officers' audio recording malfunctioned. The power light kept flashing to indicate that the batteries were dying, but he had just replaced the batteries that morning. Another officer recorded audio, and then when he listened to it later, stated that he heard an unknown voice whisper, "Hey." There were also pictures taken inside the home, and in one of the photos, there was like this cloudy image in a corner, and when the police officers enlarged the photo, the cloud seemed to resemble a face. And then in the same photo, in the enlargement, they saw a second image that was green that resembled a female. Then the Charles Austin, the police captain, said that he took photos with his iPhone and that every single photo that he took seemed to have these strange silhouettes in them. And then on the way home, his police issued radio malfunctioned. Then when he got home, his garage refused to open even though his power was on everywhere in his house. And then he said that the driver's seat in his personal car, not the police-issued car, in his personal car, his driver's seat started moving backwards and forwards on its own. A part of this investigation, and one of the reasons the kids were taken out of school was because they were concerned about the kids missing school. But LaToya said that she wouldn't be able to send the kids to school because the spirits kept making them sick or they would be all night without sleep. So this is why their kids are like kind of placed all over the place. Of course, they separate the children. And then there's a psychologist that's being brought in to evaluate everybody. So this is where with kids, it's hard because again, they don't even remember when they're doing stuff half the time. When they evaluated the kids and they spoke to the youngest, they stated that he really only acted possessed when he was like asked or when he was challenged or when he was asked a question he didn't want to answer. And she was like, every other time he was perfectly fine. Like he was perfectly coherent. He was of sound mind. But the minute you started talking about demons, his behavior just got so bizarre and it didn't make any sense. According to the evaluation, they don't think he suffered from a psychotic disorder. And the same thing with the other kids. And they were evaluated by different people. And all of them came to the same conclusion that they're not suffering from a psychological disorder, but that whenever they talk about demons, the kids, like their behavior gets a little bizarre. Toya, like, also was spoken to by a psychologist. And again, no symptoms of psychosis, no symptoms of thought disorders. And like the daughter stated during her evaluation, she was like adamant about her story. She's like, I'm telling you, doors would slam, stuff started moving around. So they're just really trying to tell them like, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm telling you that there's something possessing my house. My whole thing is if they really thought that these kids weren't possessed or weren't haunted and they were just suffering from a mental illness, they would have written that in the report. And that's not what's written in the report. Right. The report state no mental illness on any of them.
And like, it's interesting that I guess it's like they say every movie or everything you've ever heard about, like, it's kind of like the unwritten rules of the undead. And they say that when you summon them or you say their name or you call them or you talk about them, they make the appearance. That might be what was going on with the 7-year-old because it could have been attached to him. And when you ask about it, they don't want to be recognized. They don't want to be acknowledged. So I find that really interesting that all these professionals and these nurses and doctors and Department of Services and physicians can't explain it because they're always the first ones to try to justify it as something mental, just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, like besides the physician, nobody is sitting there writing hallucinations and stuff. They know they're not hallucinating. So DCS kind of concludes the investigation and they tell LaToya, you need to find a job in appropriate housing, quote, due to paranormal activity. So obviously they have to believe something because you don't put that in an official report.
And not only this, that too, why would, if you guys come to that conclusion, why would you take them out of their home that whole time anyway? I mean, it's good that they did, because who knows what would have happened if the kids stayed there. So ultimately it was a good idea. But on a professional government level, was that okay? And that's something that is kind of questionable, honestly, because it's not her fault. What if they had just put the kids with another family member, or instead of separating them, you know?
Right. So they put 2 kids in one place and 1 kid in another. So that was, to me, stupid. Now, even though they came to this conclusion and she was working on it, there's still a police investigation because, again, 911 has been called on her. Multiple things have been happening. And I honestly think that people are just fucking curious at this point. So they continue the investigation on what's going on in the home. They've already done one walkthrough. They do another one in May 10th of 2012, and it's an even bigger group. At this point, it's LaToya and her mother, Rosa. It's the same 37-year vet, Charles Austin, 2 police officers that were at the initial one, plus the priest, and another 2 police officers, a police dog, and a new DCS family case manager because Valerie had it. She refused to go back to the house. The dog, they take the dog like all around the house, but the dog didn't pick up on anything outside the house. I understand that because everything was in the house. Everybody else headed to the basement where the shit happens. The case manager is walking around and she sees a strange liquid dripping in the basement. She does what some of us would do and touches it. I wouldn't touch it. Kristi wouldn't touch it because her face is like nodding right now. But she touches it and she said it felt slippery but sticky. Priest is also there. He wants to check under the stairs for signs of like a portal to hell. So he's like, we're looking in the dirt. We're going to look for a pentagram. We're going to look for like a personal item or like an artifact. Because, you know, sometimes people use personal items as a portal to hell. Or he wanted to check if maybe somebody had died and had been buried there. You really never know. And maybe that would explain the paranormal activity. So the officers start digging a hole beneath the stairs. They find a pink press-on fingernail, a white pair of panties, a political shirt pin, a lid for a small cooking pan, socks with the bottoms cut off below the ankles, candy wrappers, and a heavy metal object. And then after finding all this, they just replace the dirt and rake over it. The priest blesses with some salt, and he said the salt is a barrier to evil, spreads it all over the basement and the stairs. And that was that. I didn't find anything else on this, and I found that super strange because I'm like, so you're just going to ignore all this shit that you
Right. A fingernail, underwear, what political pin was it? What era? Was it a kid's panty? Was it adults? Like, I'm going to sit there reeling about this forever. I wish there was more information on this.
I just want to know why the hell you looked for shit and then found it and then disregarded it.
Rebury it. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Whatever.
They're still doing the walkthrough. This new case manager, poor thing. Actually, I shouldn't say poor thing because I read in the article that she volunteered for this shit. So really not poor thing. Because now she's standing in the living room and her left pinky finger started to tingle and whiten. She said it felt broken. And then less than 10 minutes later, she said she felt as if she was having a panic attack. She couldn't breathe.
Is that the same finger that she touched the thing with?
I have no idea. I didn't say it, but it could have been. We're going to say it is. And then she couldn't breathe, so she walked outside. Then when the priest starts like questioning LaToya inside the house, she starts to get that headache again. She starts to experience shoulder pain, so she also leaves the damn house with the case manager. Charles Austin, the captain, mind you, this is a man who has been in the police force for 37 years. He has seen shit. They actually said that he had been shot. He had investigated rapes. He had investigated murders, armed robberies, all types of shit, and he refused to stay in that house after dark. He booked it. He was out the minute that nightfall hit. So he's out. So at this point, half of them are out. So then there's other officers. They continue to walk through the house. And then on the main floor, which is where all the bedrooms are, they notice an oil-like substance dripping from the blinds in a bedroom, but couldn't figure out where it was coming from. To make sure that it wasn't LaToya or Rosa who poured the substance, they used paper towels and they cleaned the substance off. Then they sealed the room and stood outside of it for 25 minutes, made sure nobody walked in. And 25 minutes later, when they walked back in, lo and behold, the oil reappeared. So according to the priest, and we know from watching all types of paranormal movies, normally something like that means there's a demonic presence. So with all of this information, the priest writes up a report with all of his findings, submits it, hoping that he'll granted permission to perform an exorcism, even though at that time, the bishop of the Archdiocese of Gary, Indiana, had not authorized an exorcism in the last 21 years that he had been. The director of communications for the diocese, Debbie Bosack, said that she couldn't really comment on whether or not the exorcism was actually approved for confidentiality reasons. But we do know that the original request, according to the priest, was denied. Instead, he was told to contact other priests who have performed exorcisms before, ask them to give him the rituals, because if you do a minor exorcism, you don't need the church's approval. I don't really know what a minor exorcism is.
I was going to say, what does that entail? You just reading the Bible over a house? Like, what exactly does a minor exorcism entail?
You talk to the demon instead of yelling at him? I don't know. So yeah, he did an intense blessing on the home to get rid of bad spirits. And then that same day, he performed this minor exorcism on LaToya. Basically, the ritual, it's a bunch of prayers and statements, and they try to cast out the demons, which to me sounds like a regular exorcism. And it was witnessed by that case manager who still hasn't fucking left this case, even after she felt that with her pinky, and 2 police officers. The case manager stated that she left believing something was going on, but that she wouldn't go as far as to say it was demonic, even though she said she had chills the whole ritual.
Kind of sounds like she's just trying to talk a big game, because I'm sure she was shitting her pants the entire time. So
exactly. Mm-hmm. She said, "We felt like someone was in the room with you, someone breathing down your neck." The fuck do you think that is?
I guess for her, she's got to see Satan to understand that it actually is something evil. I don't know.
Does she expect to see someone with like horns and like a pitchfork? What does she want? And then wait, this gets better. So after she does this visit, she has like a whole bunch of medical issues. A week after visiting the home, she gets random 3rd-degree burns from a motorcycle. Within 30 days of visiting the home, she had gotten those 3rd-degree burns, broke 3 ribs on a jet ski, broke her hand when it hit a table, and then broke an ankle.
She's either incredibly clumsy or completely cursed.
She said, quote, "I had friends who wouldn't talk to me because they believed that something had attached itself to me." Then she states like jokingly, "I'm already evil. They try to find something that's not evil and corrupted. They wouldn't waste their time on me. Bitch, stop acting like you didn't fucking bring something home. You brought something home." Maybe she's just in denial.
Yeah, she's trying to downplay. She's probably scared. Like, you know what I mean? Who wants to admit that something attacked you? You know, like I think she's in that whole, if it's not there, I'm going to pretend that it's not there, it'll go away type of thing. Like, that's the worst kind of thing to do, because I just honestly think that gears it all up for a bigger battle, if you will, because like it can sit there and take that energy and that nervousness to you. But
Kristi and I are kind of as tough as they come, and I would fucking admit it. I would rather admit that there was a demon than try to explain how I just broke half my bones in like 30 days.
Yeah, insane.
After the ritual, which is something you had mentioned before, we all know that the names of demons are like where the power comes from. Priest tells LaToya, look up the names of the demons that are tormenting you, because they each have a name, they each have a personality. And like I said, as we've all learned from movies, the name has power in it and you use it to fight against the demons. So she said that, LaToya and a friend were like looking up the demons on the internet, and they basically were just searching by the problems that they had. They start searching the internet and the computer keeps shutting down and she instantly gets sick. But she did end up finding some names. I mean, I'm pretty sure anybody who's heard of the basic demons knows who Beelzebub is. He's Lord of the Flies, which they had the fly problem, so that makes sense. And then she also found the names of some demons that torture and hurt kids. After the ritual, though, like after this all happened, the bishop actually did give the priest permission to do an exorcism. Once it has the backing of the church, it's supposed to be more powerful. So I guess maybe that's the difference between the minor and the major one. So there ended up being 3 exorcisms performed. 2 in English and 1 in Latin for those demons who don't know English. And by June 2012. So again, they moved in November 11th, and this is only June of 2012.
That's nuts. 4 exorcisms for one house.
Yep. And during each exorcism, normal praising God, condemning the devil, pressing crucifix against LaToya's head, and the normal shit that you hear in movies, I cast you out, unclean spirit, blah, blah, blah. Not going to say it because I'm afraid it's going to start rattling shit in my apartment. He says that as he goes on with the exorcism, his voice becomes louder and more forceful because you're trying to weaken the demon. And the priest stated in the article that you could tell how strong the demons were by how much LaToya was convulsing. And there were 2 police officers who actually had kept in touch with the priest ever since the first walkthrough. They were there in case LaToya needed to be restrained. So again, this is all being witnessed by other people. So LaToya stated that she just tried to pray with the priest until it got too painful. And she said she felt as if something inside her was trying to hold on and inflict pain at the same time. And she even said that it was a pain that was different from natural pain, but felt as intense as giving birth, which as someone whose best friend just gave birth, and I know all the gory details, that shit must have fucking hurt. She stated, quote, I was hurting all over from the inside out. I'm trying to do my best and be strong. So after the third exorcism, I think right before the third exorcism, there was a break in between the second and the third. In between this break, they thought that everything had kind of like subsided, but LaToya was getting really bad nightmares. At this time, she wasn't even living in the house anymore because, again, DCS had told her to get a new one if she wanted to get her kids back. So she had actually moved to Indianapolis at this point, and even in Indianapolis was still having nightmares. It wasn't until after the third and final exorcism at the end of June 2012 that she finally said that everything ended. Like the nightmares ended, and she drove home with her mom, and they kind of didn't feel that fear anymore. But at this point, the home had become some sort of like a little sensationalized little house that everybody wanted to know about this house, including the police. And at this point, they had already had some people that were moving into the house, like after the third exorcism, and everything was calmer. A new family moved into that home. They claimed that there was nothing happening, but they actually had to call the police and tell them to stop driving by the house because it was like the landlord said it was scaring the tenants that moved in because that's how often people were trying to like drive by the house and look at it. And the landlord,
it became like a spectacle.
It became a huge spectacle. Mm-hmm. And the landlord had a hard time believing anything that happened because he claimed supposedly that nothing had ever happened before and nothing had happened after LaToya.
And you know, it's funny. I've heard of a few hauntings where people have said that. Like you'll watch like a haunting in Florida.
Bill one. The family after that didn't have anything.
I'm starting to suspect, and this is completely, of course, like all these things, a theory or a hypothesis, whatever you want to call it. But I'm starting to suspect that there's just certain families or energies that expel these kinds of things. You know, like you could walk into a house and it might have a portal, but that one 7-year-old son might have been the protagonist that kind of fought all these things because they wanted his soul or they wanted something from this family. I'm starting to think that that's a possibility. There's at least been a consistency with like some of the bigger ones you've heard, but the smaller ones that don't really make a full movie or the smaller ones that don't really get recognized a lot, they always claim that it was just this one family or this one tenant or this one person that experienced it. So maybe it's not necessarily the home, maybe it's the people.
I agree with you because I feel like there's some people who are just more open, and in the case of LaToya, a lot of it has to do with your faith and if you're religious, because they were religious. She said she was a Christian, so a lot of this went with her Christian faith. It depends on your beliefs. I do believe, like, I believe in it, so maybe I'm more susceptible than someone who is hardcore pressed against it. Although I do believe that someone who's hardcore pressed against it can still experience it. But I also believe it, like you said, it's the people. We don't know if they didn't bring this from somewhere else or if something's been following them and then they just finally manifested in this house. You really never know. And there's some people who are just, again, in denial of stuff. So maybe stuff did happen, but these people refuse to acknowledge it and just chalked it up to like other shit. And we're like, nah, we have a logical explanation. I don't always believe it because I can have again, I've talked to you guys about this before. I had experiences in my old house, as did my sister, as did my mother. But if you asked my brother and you asked my father, they would tell you nothing happened. So I really believe, like you said, it's up to the people. The landlord did say that once he found out that the church approved the exorcism, he was a little bit less, quote, this is the quote, less skeptical. So I guess maybe hearing that the church backed it, he must have been like, that must have been some serious shit and there must have been proof. Because again, the church doesn't approve the exorcism if there isn't proof of something.
Right.
So it didn't make him believe, but it made him less skeptical. This happened in June, and LaToya's children were not returned to her until November, but they were returned to her. And they have experienced no activity ever since then, not in their new house or anything. And LaToya stated, quote, when you hear something like this, don't assume it's not real because I've lived it and I know it's real. But the thing about this case, and the reason I even knew about this case, is I have brought up this show before. My favorite ridiculous paranormal investigator, because he just yells and screams at ghosts, is Zach Bagans. And he does Ghost Adventures on the Travel Channel. That's not an ad, but if you want to sponsor us, you can go right ahead. He actually bought the home for $35,000. And he did a little documentary on it called Demon House. And that was released on March 16, 2018. Dread Central's Steve Barton called it, quote, one of the single most compelling documentaries on the existence of the supernatural that I've ever witnessed. So again, maybe the family didn't witness everything, but maybe they don't know what they're looking for. So Zach went in there and he thought this was really the demon house, but then he actually ended up demolishing it in January 2016. And I really don't know what he did with the house after that.
Demolish it because he had experiences?
Oh, he did. I've actually watched the documentary. It's quite interesting. I will put it up for everybody so they can watch it. But that is the case of the Evans family house or the demon house or the 200 demon house or whatever you want to call it.
It's so weird that I've never heard of this before. Like all of those shows, like Paranormal Activity, Paranormal Witness, anything with the word paranormal or haunted or whatever, and they've never even really covered this case.
I was shocked when I looked it up. I was like, did I spell this wrong? There's no way that nobody has done this case yet, and nobody has done this case.
Yeah, well, it's probably because it hasn't been a big movie yet. So that's
exactly what it is.
But that's really creepy. So let's move on to something a little less creepy. But, you know, this is Eerie October after all. So good job, Bex.
Who does that? Who does that? Who does that? Who does that?
So via HuffPost.com, our fave, man arrested for doing donuts on Donald Trump's New Jersey golf course.
There's so much worse that he could have done on that golf course.
Suspect Richard McEwen was arrested last month for breaking into Taylor Swift's Rhode Island mansion. So this is the same guy that got in trouble for stalking and I guess breaking into Taylor Swift's house. So I don't know if
he's obviously not of sound mind.
Of course not. But I don't know if Taylor Swift is anti-Trump right now. I don't know if she's come forward. I don't really know much about her, but I just find it hilarious that it's the same guy. So let's continue with what Mr. Richard decided to do here. What a difference a few weeks has made for one New Jersey man. On August 30th, Richard McEwen, 26, was arrested after he allegedly broke into Taylor Swift's beachfront mansion in Rhode Island. McEwen, who was barefoot at the time officers apprehended him,
why not?
Of course, was charged with breaking and entering and willful trespassing and later released on a $5,000 bond. However, if that arrest was intended to serve as a wake-up call to McEwen, he apparently didn't get the memo. On Monday, McEwen was charged with criminal mischief after he allegedly drove his car on President Trump's golf course in Bedminster, New Jersey, and did donuts on the green lawn, according to the Washington Post. Police said McEwen has driven his vehicle onto the greens twice in the last week, on September 3rd and September 8th. So this guy hasn't stopped.
He's a repeat offender.
I'm sorry, if I had a $5,000 bond, I wouldn't sit there and be like, how can I make it $25,000? But apparently this guy gives zero fucks. In the process, he left circles on 2 different putting greens, causing at least $17,000 in total damages.
Oh my God.
McEwen has been released pending a future court date, but a spokeswoman for the Trump organization told CNBC that, quote, he will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, end quote.
First thought was, one, Taylor Swift has a house in Rhode Island. I don't know. She's super rich, so I figure you live in New York or California. So Rhode Island
she owns in all
like
of them.
47 homes. Yeah, also, this guy gets around because he just went to this shit in Rhode Island, and he's just like, I'm going to go to Jersey and go do donuts on the golf.
No, he's from Jersey. He actually drove up Dock Her in Rhode Island, then came back down and did donuts on Trump's golf resort. Not once, but twice. Or actually 3 times, it seems. So,
how did he get on there so many times? You think there would be like a watch list?
The golf course is supposed to be like open and free. So there are places you could just drive on in or waltz on in. So I guess he's just taking advantage of the select areas. Plus he's from there. I'm sure he's the way around. But
you just imagine like working there and there's like an alert like the dude's doing donuts again.
It's that same kid, that Taylor Swift stalker. What kind of separation of degree is that between Taylor Swift and Trump? You know what I mean? They have that one comment.
Like, yeah, what was the rationale? And like, all right, so this day I'm just going to take a little drive and go stalk Taylor in Rhode Island. And on my way home, I'm just going to do some donuts. And then when he got away with it, he was like, what do I do today? Maybe I'll do some donuts again. Like, I don't understand.
Yeah, get a job, kid. Get a job. That's all I'm saying.
And just make sure you're not wearing shoes when you do it either.
If you guys enjoyed this episode, I hope it creeped you out a little bit. If you guys enjoyed it, please check us out on social media. Send us an email, theearieamericas@gmail.com. We are always looking for your personal stories, insight, whatever. Just reach out to us. Feel free. But most importantly,
stay weird, Americas. Bye.